happy to welcome back to the podcast a great guy, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy. The difference from when he came on last time, he is now running for president of the United States. He's a best-selling author. He's host of the Vivek Show podcast and his website, Vivek, Vivek 2024.com. Vivek, you have jumped into this presidential fray. I got to say it was an perhaps unexpected, certainly an audacious move. And it seems like you're building a theme or an argument around American exceptionalism. Am I right about that? Do you think that American exceptionalism has been eroding or declining? And what are the causes of that?
Yeah, I think American exceptionalism has become a four-letter word in our culture. And I think, Dinesh, it's because we're in the middle of this national identity crisis where faith, patriotism, hard work, family, these things have disappeared. And I can tell you my generation, I'm a millennial. I'm the first millennial candidate to ever run as a Republican for president. Really, my generation, but every generation in this country is so hungry for purpose and meaning. And when the things that used to satisfy our purpose are gone, from faith to belief in country, we then allow wokism and victimhood and climatism and COVIDism to fill the void, now transgenderism. It's not an accident. It's not a coincidence that we see the rise of these secular religions, these cults in America at the same time. It's because we're starved for purpose and meaning. And I think that what the next U.S. president can do, what the conservative movement can do, is to fill that vacuum of purpose with a vision of what it means to be American. And I'm all in for the America First agenda, but to put America first, we need to rediscover what America is. And that's the movement that I'm leading, hopefully all the way through leading in the White House and doing to this country what Reagan did in the 1980s, leading our country out of the last national identity crisis. That's what I want to do to lead our country out of this one.
Vivek, if I flash back a generation to when I was coming of age in American politics, it appeared like the left's critique of American exceptionalism was that American exceptionalism did not apply to everybody, so that there was a ladder of opportunity, but blacks in the South particularly were excluded. And so the original project appeared to be, let's make sure that these principles are applied more ecumenically, more universally. Everybody has a chance. But now it seems like there is an attack on the principles themselves. And wokism, as you just suggested a moment ago, is almost a rival and alternative ideology unto itself. What do you think that those people want, and why is it bad?
Yeah, so it's really interesting you point that out, Dinesh. Back then, it was a debate about, do we have equality of opportunity? And I think that's a fair debate to have. America has never been perfect. Perfection doesn't exist on God's green earth, but it is about the pursuit of perfection. But that's a reasonable debate to have. What's happening today is something different altogether. It's that when the civil rights movements actually achieved their own promised land, today there is equality before the law based on race or gender. And say what you will, people are free to marry who they want, if they want, when they want. It's precisely when that movement reached the promised land, its own promised land, that it then went berserk, that it actually then became most vehement about systemic racism or transgender ideology right when its own goals were achieved. So that reveals what's going on. What's going on is actually that when faith, patriotism, and hard work disappeared, people then latched on to civil rights as their own hook for giving themselves a sense of purpose and direction in life. But when that struggle, that so-called struggle, was itself achieved in its own goals, in delivering itself from that struggle, then you have a group of people who are just lost. It's like the Israelites. When the Israelites are lost in the desert, what do? They said they want to go bend the knee to Pharaoh. Well, you know what? We're lost in the desert now. And you ask why it is. We do have an authoritarian sort of regime growing in this country, a merger of state power and corporate power, the woke industrial complex, as I called it in my first book, that's far more powerful than either one alone. But as much as even people like me have been complaining about the top-down problem, it's equally a bottom-up cultural problem too, where that trick only works if we have a culture, a people, a generation that wants to bend the knee to that authority. And so what I'm working on now through this presidential campaign, which is really more of a cultural campaign than a political campaign, to be honest, what I'm working on is let's fill that void of purpose so that people don't feel compelled to bend the knee to the church of climate or the church of gender ideology as they're doing today. And that's what I think makes this far more dangerous and far more concerning than the, I think, more rational discussions about whether or not we have equality of opportunity, what the political debates used to look like in the 1990s.
Vivek, you're totally right on about this. I just shared a video a couple of days ago with Debbie on social media. It was picked off of TikTok, but you have a young woman and she's extremely enraged. And she's basically saying, I like to have nice things, but now I'm learning that I really have to go and work 8 hours a day to get them. And she goes, why? Now, when I think about that, I think to myself, I don't know what to say to this person because all my life I've taken certain things as a given. It's a given that I'm a male and not a female. It's a given that life will end at some point and doesn't go on forever. It's a given that we have to work in order to have a livelihood. And yet it seems that there are people, particularly younger people these days, for whom these things are not given, or they're outraged at the givenness of nature. What would you say to someone like that who seems to feel that life should simply rain like manna from heaven and shouldn't have to work and you shouldn't have to be what nature made you to be? You need to have choices in these matters.
Look, my message to young people, actually, you're reminding me of a commencement speech that I gave to actually my own high school about a year ago, or last cycle before last. It was the first time I looked into everyone in that audience where not a single one of those high school students was even born when those two planes hit the Twin Towers on 9/11. And I picked that because I actually gave my high school commencement address when I was a high school senior, and it was about my experience of going through 9/11. And because that happened when I was in high school. And why do I bring that up? I think that part of what we have today is a culture where it's not that people are encountering too much hardship. It's that we haven't encountered enough of it. Actually, in the last decade of our cultural life as Americans, there hasn't been that 9/11 moment. And I'm not saying that we need a tragedy like that, but we've had talk about raining from on high like manna from heaven. The Federal Reserve has been printing money from on high like manna from heaven, artificially juicing an economy that actually was far behind in its own ability to produce. And so we haven't encountered or had to face that real hardship. Hardship is not the same thing as victimhood. That is my message to the young generation. Hardship can be what teaches you who you really are. That's what we need to rediscover and re-embrace. And the irony is that policies now given to us by the Biden administration or otherwise ensures that hardship indeed we will have. But I'm an optimist, Dinesh. I think that can be tough in the short run, economically and otherwise, but it could be what our culture needs in the long run to actually rediscover our fortitude, because that's a big part of what we're missing.
Let's take a pause. When we come back, more with Vivek Ramaswamy.